Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum. You're watching Newsroom. I'm your host, Khalid. But today is the 15th of September 2023. It's a Friday, last day of the week, and we've got lots to discuss with you. So, without further ado, these are the segments, stories, or important events that we will be discussing or deciphering during the course of our show. We'll begin, ladies and gentlemen, with India's fake claim of being the biggest democracy, whether it be at the G7 summit, where Narendra Modi has claimed it, where he also calls India one of the biggest pluralistic societies in the world as well, whether it be a booklet that was issued supposedly at the recent G20 summit that was held in India, wherein there were a lot of fabrications and outright lies, as have been highlighted by different Indian journalists, whether it be the combined opposition to the BJP in the form of India, the combined opposition that are also highlighting these atrocities that are being committed by the BJP led government, or whether it be what is happening in Manipur, what is happening in Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir, or in other parts of India, which is a complete opposite of what India or the current Prime Minister of India is portraying his country and his government to be at all the international fora. This is something that we will be highlighting in our first segment, and that is all about India and its blatant lies. Our second story, ladies and gentlemen, concerns climate change. Now, nothing new as far as Pakistan is concerned. We have seen earthquakes, we've seen floods, but now other countries are also facing the brunt, whether it be in the West, whether it be in countries like Libya, where the death toll apparently has crossed 20,000. It is not a man-made disaster, but more or less a climate-induced disaster, and there are other things that kind of exacerbate this. The fact remains that climate change has completely changed the geography of the entire world, and the world needs to come as one in order to do the needful and combat the effects of climate change. This is going to be our second story. Then we'll be going to talking about the indictment of the current US President's son, Hunter Biden, who was indicted yesterday for illegally buying a gun 5 years ago, at a time when he admits he was using drugs heavily. There are 3 charges that have been put on Hunter Biden. The third charge is based on false statements that he illegally possessed the gun, a charge that he can bring up that of course that he can lead to 10 years in prison as far as his indictment is concerned. Then we'll be talking about Iran, that says it is ready for a prisoners swap deal with the US. Iran's foreign minister says his country is ready to implement a Qatar mediated deal with the US, under which Washington and Tehran would free 5 prisoners and $6 billion in Iranian assets that are being held in South Korea, and that will be released. And finally, we'll be talking about NASA, that has launched the search for unidentified foreign objects, otherwise known as UFOs. We've seen so many series and films about it, but it seems as if it is a reality. Whether it be what has been unearthed at Mexico recently, whether it be the NASA officials who on Thursday have joined the search for UFOs, but reflect the stigma attached to the field, saying that the US Space Agency kept secret for hours the identity of the person heading a new program tracking mystery flying objects. Are they for real or not? This is our last story. Let's begin with our first, and that concerns India's fake claim of being the world's largest democracy. Whether it be during the visits of Narendra Modi, the current Indian Prime Minister, in different countries across the world, in the US, in France, whether it be on different summits where he highlights India's brightness, India's democracy, India's pluralism, and so on and so forth. These are all but blatant lies. The reality is far from the truth, and the fact also remains that a lot of countries in the West are lapping all of this up. A lot of question marks were also raised recently when a booklet that was published at the time of the G20 summit in India raised a lot of eyebrows, especially within the Indian journalistic community. They were asking as to why most of the facts that have been written in that booklet are not based on facts, are not based on truth. Also, what India is perpetrating within its country, whether it be in the Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir Valley, whether it be in Manipur, whether it also be the United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres, who has termed religious intolerance totally unacceptable while referring to recent attacks on Muslims and Christians in India. a lot of realities are being unearthed as we speak, as far as India is concerned. Sindhu Saab, this recent G20 summit that was held in India, we did not hear much about the countries that were there talking about human rights issues in different parts of India. B, the different information that was perpetrated or portrayed by India as far as its country and its realities are concerned were far from the truth. And this has been highlighted by many Indian journalists on different fora. What do you have to say about that? Does the global north understand what India really stands for?
Yeah, this document is really, I think, a thing which is really laughable, because they've tried to redefine the definition of democracy and calling themselves as mother of democracy. Whereas, as far as the students of political science is concerned, they know that the mother of democracy is basically the Greeks, or the ancient Greeks who actually introduced the Plato and his book Republic, you know. But anyway, Indians, I think they have become pseudo historical and pseudo intellectuals. They are trying to rewrite the narrative, and they're in rewriting their national narrative. They are trying to rewrite the historical narrative also. I think they are planning to portray themselves as a historical power, as a civilization which ruled the world for about 4,000 to 5,000 years back, not in terms of physical, as if as a physical empire, but as a empire of wisdom and as an empire of scientific progression and knowledge. Whereas if we follow this thesis, and if we agree to that, then it is very difficult to actually traverse the journey through which the actual knowledge of contemporary knowledge has come to us. So one thing is that, and the other thing which is, I think, they are trying to depict is that every solution, everything, every subject, be it diplomacy, be it statecraft, be it the politics, it is derived from Mahabharata, and especially the contestation between those two cousins of Guruvas and Pandavas, in which the Arjun, the Krishna, they played their parts, and they glorified the Hindu entity and the Hindu mindset in a way that now it is also historically relevant, and it is also intellectually also relevant. So in this context, they've issued a booklet to all the dignitaries, and which by the name of in which they have depicted this genesis of India, of it being a Bharat, it being a Bharat. So Bharat, again, it is a derivative from Mahabharata, and it depicts that in excluding the name India and calling themselves as Bharat is exclusion, that now India is a state which only belongs to Hindus, and anybody who is linked to Mahabharata, who is linked to Ramayana, who is linked to Bhagavad Gita, only he is actually authorized, he is actually politically a real here, who is the real person who has to be there in India as a Hindu or as an Indian or as a Bharati. So these developments are actually the myopic worldview, I would say, in this era of geopolitics, in this multilateralism, and in these, in the concepts of new regionalism. I think it is something which is very myopic and very narrow.
This portrayal being a myopic and a narrow one, but it's also at the same time extremely alarming. You're trying to toy with history. You are trying to change the history of the last thousands of years, and you are trying to change the history of the subcontinent. Shouldn't there be any full stop put to these changes that are being put, whether it be the changes in India's history, whether it be the changes in the demography of the Indian held Jammu and Kashmir region, and so on and so forth? These changes that are unethical, that are abnormal, that are against all norms. Don't you feel somebody needs to pressurize India or tell India to stop what it's doing?
Yeah, this should be done, but actually, once the socialism and the communism was on the go, especially from Eastern Europe towards the Western Europe, many of the Eastern European countries banned the book Animal Farm and by the book of George Orwell, 1984. The same way, I remember that a book was written by Wendy Doniger, the Hindu, in which she had a very scholarly, in which she has done a very scholarly critique of Hinduism, especially this myth building into a political context. And again, the same book was pulped all over the India, and it was banned in India also, and the copies were withdrawn. And the same, the build-up I am seeing right now. So actually, the world cannot enforce India, or actually, at least convince India that they should, come to terms to the contemporary, the lineages of the knowledge which are coming from the Anglo-Saxon origin or from the Greek origin. And because now Indians think that they are a civilization, and they are trying to actually rebuild and reinforce that concept amongst the polity of nation, that being a civilization, they have to be respected. They have to be respected as an empire. They have to be respected as a civilization and as a upcoming regional power, with calling themselves as the mother of democracy. So, any pressure from outside trying to convince this Hinduista-minded sort of a autocratic democracy, I think that won't work, and that is very difficult. But it will also actually hamper the real progress in terms of the sense of freedom and liberty, which is actually co-joined, and it is actually the stream which has to follow with the material progress of any country. So I think that soon India will eventually fall into a dilemma.
All right, Abid, you talk of respect, but how can one respect a country that is involved in human rights abuses, whether it be in Manipur, whether it be in illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir, whether it be in other parts of the country, whether it be against the Sikhs or the Christians or the Muslims? The list goes on. How can you respect such a country? How can you respect such a government? How can you respect such a society in your point of view?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Actually, respecting these, anomalies of political intent is not at all actually the thing which they can expect from the world or from the countries, and at least from the regional countries. But these things, these violation in terms of human rights, these violation in terms of the freedom of minorities, and also the subjugation and sort of a revengeist idealism which they want to display and enforce, especially in the region. I think even doing this, they are doing a harm to themselves. And the only thing which is actually endorsing them is the new concept of capitalism and globalization, in which they being a very big market, and they being an upcoming producer of mundane things, run-of-the-mill factory items. I think that is attracting the world, or that is actually making the people in the corridors of, I think, economic powers to keep their mouths shut for the time being. But eventually, I think these things will come up to the conscience of international conscience, and people will ask questions that how can a country which portrays itself to be mother of democracy, a country which portrays itself to be a very cultured civilization, with historical linkages, how can that country perpetrate such type of things against its own people, against the people in the region, and against the subjugated people all around its borders and frontiers?
is geo-economic or geopolitical or geostrategic importance that to some countries in the global north India has in the region is so important, is so paramount that all human rights issues that India is involved in are put to one side, and people do not even look in that direction. I'd like to refer to what the United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres recently, very recently highlighted, and he termed the religious intolerance totally unacceptable while he was referring to the recent attacks on Muslims and Christians in India. Do you feel this is something that is going to go on, what India is doing till the time that the global north needs India as a player that can side with them as far as the geo-economic or geostrategic situation in the region is concerned?
Yeah, unfortunately, it seems that it will happen like that. There are two reasons to that. One I have already explained, that because of the new capitalism which is emerging, in which the India is being taken as the new upcoming economic engine of the region, and even more than that. The other is actually the balancing, as a balancing power which India is taken to counter the influence of China, especially in the Indian Ocean and also in this regional context in which the Gulf is concerned, the Indian mainland is concerned, and the regional countries of Himalayas are concerned. So I think with these two things, unfortunately, the shortcomings of Indian state in terms of the human rights, in terms of the freedom of secluded classes or the oppressed peoples or the oppressed regions, I think that will be tolerated by the powers to be and will be ignored with a very mild eye to put on.
Tolerated, Abid, Sindhu, within the Indian public, do you feel, of all of this that is happening, do you feel the Indian public that has the right to vote will continue to side by Narendra Modi and the BJP and the Hindutva policies? Will they tilt over the collection of the opposition parties that now calls itself India? Will that change the way politics are being done in the next elections?
Yeah, the internal dynamics of the political arena of India is also changing. At a very tremendous speed, the left in India is being converted into a very radicalized right. So center has almost gone. So a state without a center, with a majority people turning into the right, I think the political debate or the contestation in terms of challenging these developments is to me, to myself, it seems to be very bleak, and especially once a leader like Modi, he is also being taken as a person who is spearheading the economic growth of the India, converting the lower middle class into middle class, and also trying to make to make the two ends of Indian people meet through new progression, through developmental projects, through all these things. I think the inner less of the polarity of the political divide amongst the people of India is very rapidly converting into the right, as a right winger of Hindutva mindset, with again becoming part of some sort of affiliates with BJP, with RSS, or with Bajrang Dal, or at least becoming a family co-joint tribe of Sevak Samaj.
I totally agree with you on that, Abid Sindhu, and the fact remains, the sad fact remains, that India is being converted into a democracy that used to be a couple of decades back into a complete right-wing Hindutva, BJP-led RSS ideological state that more or less is crushing the identity of all the other religions, sects apart from the Hindus, and even within the Hindus it is crushing the identities of the lower sects and the lower caste. And of course an example was that booklet that we talked about, and this booklet unfortunately is such a sad commentary on the state of affairs under the current government, and is an excuse for Mr. Modi's monarchical style of government, saying that he can call his government that is a monarchy in fact as a democracy. Thank you very much Abid, Latif, Sindhu Saab to have joined us, to have talked to us about India, about G20 summit, this booklet that was released in which India was called to be the mother of democracies, and so many sad lies that have been portrayed as truths there, and in so many other places where Mr. Narendra Modi has been highlighting India and his government's role. Let's come to our second segment, and that concerns climate change, Libya, Pakistan, what needs to be done, why is whatever is happening around the world is happening, what can we do together as a global order, together as a world. More in the following report.
Divided and embroiled in a civil war, Libya is hit by devastating floods. Thousands are dead and thousands more missing. The country is reeling from the devastating flooding, which is, in part, caused by strong storms itself, but Libya's catastrophe was greatly exacerbated by a lethal confluence of factors, including aging, crumbling infrastructure, inadequate warnings, and the impacts of the accelerating climate crisis. The extreme rainfall that hit Libya was brought on by a system called Storm Daniel. Storm Daniel was formed over Greece on the 4th of September. It caused strong winds, heavy rains, flooding, and deaths there, and in Turkey and Bulgaria before crossing the Mediterranean. The storm made landfall in Libya a few days later, causing flooding in cities along its eastern coast, including Benghazi, Beida, and Derna. Derna was the hardest hit after two dams burst upstream from the city, releasing an estimated 30 million cubic meters of water that tore through the city of about 100,000 inhabitants. The dams had not been maintained for more than 2 decades, and the infrastructure was not built to withstand the effects of this week's floods. The risk climate-fueled extreme weather poses to infrastructure, not just dams, but everything from buildings to water supplies, is a global one, and international community must step up efforts to help build the developing world climate-resilient infrastructure.
To discuss this, we've been joined in the studios by Dr. Pervaiz. Amir. He's a climate change expert and a flood expert as well. Thank you very much, Dr. Saab, to have joined us. Pleasure to have you in the studios with us. First of all, explain us a little bit about Storm Daniel, Libya. How can a storm create such a devastation in a country such as Libya?
I think what's happening is that there is a temperature rise in the Mediterranean, like in other oceans. In Libya, surrounding Libya, the temperature is about 27.5 degrees C, whereas the normal should be about, on the higher side is about 26 degrees C. So already what you're seeing is that the oceans and like the Mediterranean Sea, there the temperature is rising. That's one of the fundamental reasons for what you're seeing over here. What has happened is that this storm did not only take over Libya, it's taken over Greece, it's taken over Bulgaria, and it's also taken over Turkey. So they face similar damages, but not to this extent, even though the rainfall in Greece was much higher. But over here what you get is that you got extreme winds in this area, and then you have 2 dam busts. That's the thing which really triggered everything along with it. So I feel that it's basically climate change which is behind this, what we saw in Pakistan, what we are seeing elsewhere in the world. I'd also like to note with you that July this year was the highest temperatures ever recorded in the world. Well, it's about for 1500 years when we go back and we try to extrapolate what the temperatures were. This is the highest, the most hottest year in the history of the world. So that is what is triggering all these mechanisms. It's this El Nino is one of the main phenomena which was already ongoing, but what's happening over here is essentially this warming of these oceans, and we knew it. I mean, the warning from the climate scientists last 15 years was very clear. Nobody has really taken heed. They said, oh, well, when it will come, we'll worry about it.
But Dr. Pervaiz, why is the world not taking heed? Why is the world not taking action? So many pledges are made. You go to all the COPs, you go to all the important moods in Geneva. They talk about this, they highlight it, there are facts, there are figures, but no action is taken. Why? Is the priority different for different countries in the world as far as climate change is concerned?
Very much. If you saw what was happening in United States, it basically backed out of the agreement, you know, the COP 25 Paris agreement. They basically walked out. They said we really don't have anything to do with it. The West is unwilling, while they pay lip service, they do it very frequently, they're unwilling to share the burden of the cost. They're unwilling to mitigate. China and India maybe to some extent are trying to sort of take a lead role, but the West, they talk, that's what it is. I've attended most of the COPs earlier. There is one which is just coming up in November, COP 28. It's lip service. Gutierrez was here, you recall, doing a program. You know, Pakistan's case was much larger than what you're seeing over here. We had 2022 was very devastating for us. 2010 was devastating for us. But what you see over here, that the world is not willing to come up, put the money on the table and go and reduce its CO2 emissions. That's very clear. The reason is simple. If the United States was to come up in a more forward-looking posture and say that, okay, we'll take the lead and we'll do this, the litigation which emerges from that is so much that it would amount into a couple of $100 trillion. I mean, Pakistan would be the first one will be putting up the bill over there, you know, look over here that we are losing over $100 billion in one flood and $100 billion in the other flood. Where do we stand? And that goes for all the other countries in the world. So the West is playing it hide and seek, you know. They'll do the lip service even in this COP 2028 coming up in
COP 28,
28 in Dubai, you know. It's lip service, and they come and we enjoy a nice cup of coffee, you enjoy some party, make big statements, and then everybody.
But you know, then why make a COPs if you can't translate the pledges into action? Because sooner or later these very countries who are playing lip service will be affected by climate change as well. Will then they do the needful, or are they waiting for, you know, the thunder to strike in their own neighborhood?
They're already facing the music. If you see Australia, what was happening with those wildfires, if you see what's happening in Europe, even in the United States, the frequency of hurricanes, tornadoes is increasing. But if you look at in the macro terms, what they feel is that you can sustain it. I mean, America is a very big economy, you know, it can sustain with $25 trillion of a GDP. I mean, it's in a different ball game, you know, okay, you lose a trillion here, you lose a trillion there, you can absorb that cost. When it comes to litigation, when it comes to financing, and when it comes to making the commitment, their way of life is affected. Unless the world starts sitting back and saying that we simply cannot live this way of life. It has to change. These are all Mauritanians. They want more and more. One car in my garage. No, I'm not happy with it. I want 4 cars in my garage. They don't want to change their lifestyle. Look at aviation. Look at the way we burn fuel. We are not willing to do that, you know. I mean, Pakistan, even the price has gone up. All we've done is put up our Land Cruisers, we were on a little hold, but we still keep on going full dose on our travel. What does COP do? It will bring in thousands of people. I mean, the one in 2015, we had 52,000 people at that, you know. This is a very, very large COP. These ones are much smaller, but then people travel, then they come over there, they have a very big party, in the end they make ceremonial statements. This forum is not able to provide us a framework by which action can be taken. And it does not put responsibility. It does not put responsibility on the 5 or 6 main countries which are the...
But then how can you put forward a framework that can actually be actionable?
I think it has to be within a legal framework. You have to, the countries realize the problem. They realize where the cost has to be put in. They are not willing to come up with the money. The money, $200 billion is available. That's in the climate fund. All the main institutions, IMF, others, they are sensitive. They said we are very sensitive to it. But when it comes to taking actions, unless it starts burning at this level in their own countries, I don't think that's going to. You're very right. Yeah, let's see if France was going down and everything was falling, the Eiffel Tower is falling. Yes, then it's time that you say, that, okay, we might want to do a little action. They lost 15,000 people in about 10, 15 years back due to a heat wave. That time people were a bit scary. You had these big hurricanes in Florida and these other places, but they were able to absorb that cost. And it's in a long-term framework. My own feeling is that unless a significant change in the way we live is brought into being, I really don't see much. I was saying this 15 years back, that look, what you're saying on these temperatures, that we'll control it at 1.5 degrees, this is nonsense. You've set the clock into motion, you know, it doesn't change with that. Just by saying that, oh, we'll curb this, you don't play with nature. Once you screw up nature, and then you hope that nature will respond and sit back and say that, okay, now you're touching this variable, you're doing a little bit less gas, and things will be under control. They've got the wrong ball in the motion. What you need to do is to still come back. I think the forum is good in that sense that people still come back on a platform. You need to make the responsibility back to these 5-6 major countries. We are Pakistan bunkos. We are 135th in the emissions number. We are nowhere, but we are the ones which are facing the brunt, you know. This country, which Libya, which sort over there, I never even considered Libya, you know, in the Mediterranean, Greece. I mean, these are not in the list of the most vulnerable countries.
But then we saw what happened.
You saw what happened. And they're now saying that it's maybe 20,000 people. Some say 5,000 are dead. They're doing the counting. This is bureaucracy, you know, which gives you different numbers. But we are just recently facing this with our problem within the Satluj. We'll face it within a year or two in our other areas. The same level of flooding. The only thing here is the dam bust. God forbid, if we had that problem in one of our structures. These are baby dams. This is a 15-foot baby dam. What you have over here is we have giants. We have 6 million acre feet of water which is going to come down like hell, you know. And we have a lot of earthquakes in these areas, so we need to be extra sensitive. This is a lesson for Pakistan to learn that, look, we are going for infrastructure. Are we putting the right parameters in place? Are we doing the right type of analysis? Is it strongly science-based engineering so that we don't face this type of situation? India lost $1 billion dam a couple of years back, you know, where the Japanese built it. What happened over there was they forgot to look at the possibility of glacier melt. Glacier melt came, that dam bust. So they lost people in hundreds and a lot of losses. So we need to be very careful on that. We need to take a much more maturer look. And I think the institutions which are currently existing in Pakistan, they're really not designed for that. I mean, they're not designed.
So we need to update those in your point of view. You talked about the El Nino phenomenon. You said that that is a very important phenomenon that has been the root cause of a lot of what is happening. A lot of people are also talking about Medicain, which is a rare but destructive weather phenomenon that scientists believe will intensify in a warming world. And they say what happened in Libya is also an example of Medicain. What is Medicain?
I am not much aware of that, but what I know is that the relationships are very clear. As temperatures rise, what happens is the water vapors, the precipitation goes up in the cloud system. Wherever there are going to be a rise in temperatures, what you're going to get is repeatedly you're going to get these hurricanes and this phenomena. So, okay, they tag along. The logic is very simple. You can predict very easily the rise in temperature. You cannot predict precipitation. This is trying to predict precipitation. It's very difficult. You see, we are, even our WMOs and the Pakistan, we every say that it will rain today, it will not. But whenever you say that the temperature will rise, we are very clear, the mathematics is very clear on the rise on temperatures. So what you need to do is you need to still stick to those two formulations. Try to control your CO2 emissions as quickly as you can. I mean, there is no two thinking about it, you know. And Pakistan should come out as a case which clearly demonstrates to the world that, look, this is isolated. This is really isolated, what you saw in Libya. But South Asia is not going to be isolated. The moment you get destruction on these glaciers in these upper areas, the devastation will be in millions. It's not going to be in these 5,000 or 10,000 people you have lost. It's going to be in millions. So it's a warning sign. It's another warning sign for the world. How it wants to respond, that has to be seen.
But that we'll see maybe in COP28, maybe some kind of a realization will come. But that only time will tell whether they do something or not. A lot of things are turbocharged. If you see, the weather is turbocharged, the storms are turbocharged, the rainfall is turbocharged all across the world. Is it because of the El Nino phenomenon?
It's very much due to El Nino phenomena that will continue for another 5-7 years. But then this comes in cycles. This is only one of the one aspect. But your other aspect is the man-made, human-made increase in temperatures. You know, that's a cyclical phenomena of how the currents sort of move around. It's not because of that only, it is the human element is very much there. Nobody has decreased the use of fuels. Nobody has decreased the number of flights. What I saw the other day was it's something like 800 new Boeings being brought into the system, you know. Just one country like India is picking up a very big tab, you know. You look at New Zealand, some of the others.
So damage to the climate, to the whole system,
the
in
whole
fact.
system, you know. So, and where you take those flights, what you do, the cumulative effect is going to be on the world. So we, as the most vulnerable people, the poorer segments of the society, even over here, what you saw is it's the people at the lower tranche of the society, you know, they're the ones who got washed up, and that same thing which happens in Pakistan.
Do you also feel, I mean, a lot of question marks are also coming as to what happened in Libya is not just natural disaster, but it's an accumulation of natural disaster and man-made issues. I mean, there were issues as far as neglect is concerned in the infrastructure, as far as a lot of corruption, which led to things not moving and not being constructed the way they should have been, and that led to an exacerbation when the the dams actually burst. In fact, the dams also bursting, they say, because they were not properly constructed. Do you feel it is countries, this is also due to neglect by people, and if so, do you feel countries like Pakistan need to be extremely vigilant and update their infrastructures, especially those that are vulnerable?
Very much so. In their case, in Libya's case, there is a sort of a civil war. There are the bipolar government. There are two different governments which are going there. This rebel-like situation has been going on for the last 10-15 years. That has contributed. They still don't want aid. They are having problems that if you want to give, Pakistan wants to give aid, who do you give that aid to? There are basically two. It's a very unfortunate statement which I'm going to make. I don't want to see a country like Pakistan be put into that same position as which Libya is in. We have polarization in our society. We don't want to do that. You know, you have, if IMF wants to give Pakistan some money, it wants to first say that the sitting government, and then it wants to go with the government which has been taken out. You don't want to have a parallel system running especially under these climate-induced type of changes, you know.
All right. You know, the Deputy Mayor of Derna, Ahmed Madrood, says that the dams had not been properly maintained since 2002, the reason for which they burst when this phenomenon struck, when the storm Daniel struck Libya. When it comes to countries such as Pakistan, other countries as well, do you also think that we need to bring in experts that ascertain what the level of construction is of our dams, of our infrastructure that is susceptible to future damage?
I think so. What we did is that we had some of the best advice in the world. We have, like for Tarbela and for Mangla, we've done whatever best we could. We take a 1,000 return period. What is on the seismology, what can happen in terms of earthquakes, what type of flooding can you expect. Those parameters were good when there was no major impetus from the climate change. Now it's a different ball game. I mean, if 10 times more water comes into Tarbela, I mean, I cannot say that Tarbela will withstand all of that. So what you need to do is the design parameters, they have to now change immediately, that okay, we are looking at a very, very serious situation. Let's, even if it's going to be a little bit more costly, we want to go into there and we want to induce modeling in a way that okay, the parameters will change. I mean, you get more water, you get what has happened over there. You look at Morocco, there was one, then they immediately got an earthquake, you know, also. So 5,000, 4,000 people going from the earthquake. Earthquakes follow under this situation. Whenever, what is dams and water? It's a very large weight on the world. So what happens over there, then you start shifting, and so there is some not one-to-one correspondence, but there's a relationship over there.
And I just hope that, you know, the world realizes through future moods such as COP28 as to what is happening in Morocco, what is happening in Turkey, what is happening in Libya, what happened in Pakistan. These should be put as test cases, as examples of what other countries can also sustain in the coming years if the world does not come as one in order to thwart the attempt, you know, these effects of climate change that are slowly and steadily engulfing the world. And I really hope that, you know, the responsibility or the onus of responsibility on the important countries, as you have mentioned, Dr. Saab, comes to the forefront before it's way too late. Thank you very much, Dr. Pervaiz, to have joined us, to have talked to us about this very, very important issue that is climate change and how it has impacted different countries. It has impacted us, and now it has impacted Libya, Morocco, and Turkey as well. But the latest example is Libya. Thank you very much. I'd welcome all the way to the studio to talk to us about this. Please have a seat for 5 more minutes. We'll just end the show with these 3 stories. The first concerns US President Joe Biden's son, Hunter Biden, who has been indicted on gun charges. He has been charged with 2 counts of making false statements. statements for claiming on forms that he was not using drugs illegally at the time he brought a Colt revolver in Delaware. A third charge says that based on the false statements, he illegally possessed the gun, a charge that can bring up to 10 years in prison for Hunter Biden. Now, the charges have been filed by the Justice Department's special counsel who has been investigating Biden since the year 2018. This came 2 months after the plea deal between Biden and Weiss covering the gun charge. Of course, in this July 26 hearing, the deal collapsed, that the deal that had been made over the issue of whether Biden should have been immune from any other charges also being investigated. This, on the one hand, could be laudable that the son of a president is now being charged under the law for the things that he had done, but at the same time it might be raising a lot of concerns as to why certain liberties had been taken. Let's come to our next story, and that concerns Iran. That says it is ready to implement prisoner swap deal with the United States of America. This has been said by an official. Under the Qatar mediated deal, 5 prisoners would be freed by each side, and $6 billion in Iranian assets are going to be released. This deal has drawn a lot of criticism from the Republicans, who say that the deal will improve the Iranian economy at a time when the country poses a growing threat to US troops and allies in the regions. The deal of the prisoner swap includes American prisoners like Siamak Nazami, who was detained in 2015, and Murad Tahbaz, a British American conservationist of Iranian descent, who was arrested in 2018. Let's come to our last story, and that concerns UFOs, unidentified foreign objects, and NASA. Now, NASA on Thursday has officially joined the search for these unidentified foreign objects, but reflecting the stigma that is attached to the field because a lot of questions emanate from it. The US Space Agency has kept secret for hours the identity of the person who is heading this program. An independent team of 16 researchers concluded in a report that was recently taken out by NASA that the search for these UFOs demands a rigorous evidence-based approach. Now, there have been more than 800 events collected over 27 years, of which 2 to 5% are thought to be possibly anomalous, the report's authors also say in May. Interesting times ahead as far as this identification of UFOs are concerned, whether they are real, whether they exist or not, as was recently shown in Mexico by certain scientists. Only time will tell. With that, ladies and gentlemen, we come to an end of today's newsroom. This is the last day of the week, so we'll see you inshallah on Monday with news stories, segments that pertain to us, you and Pakistan. Stay safe, have a wonderful weekend, and we'll see you inshallah in 3 days' time.